we all learned about in school who disappeared out of nowhere. Miss Amelia Earhart.
July 2nd, 1937, Amelia Earhart's final radio transmission. "We are running on line 157337. Then silence. For 89 years, the world believed she vanished without a trace over the Pacific Ocean. But here's what you weren't told, and what one investigator spent 40 years proving. She didn't disappear. She landed safely. She survived for weeks, possibly months, sending desperate radio calls that were heard by dozens of people. And the U.S. government covered it up. The evidence has been sitting in plain sight this entire time. A photograph taken 3 months after her disappearance that shows wreckage on a reef. Bones found in 1940 that forensic analysis proves are hers with 99.28% certainty. Radio transmissions heard by ordinary people across America. But there's one detail that changes everything about how we understand what happened to her. The detail at the end that explains why she couldn't be rescued, even when search planes flew directly overhead. Rick Gillespie didn't want anything to do with the Amelia Earhart mystery. He was an aviation accident investigator, former pilot. When people asked him about Earhart, his response was simple. She ran out of gas looking for a tiny island in a big ocean. There's nothing we can do. It's a media circus. Then in 1988, 2 retired military navigators called him. "We've got a theory." "I don't want to hear theories," Rick said. "No, listen. We're navigators. What Amelia said in her last transmission makes perfect sense to us. She was following a line of position, 157-337. If she did what she said she was doing, she should have reached Gardner Island." Rick paused. "Wait. Are you telling me nobody's looked for Amelia Earhart in the most likely place?" "That's exactly what we're saying." And that phone call started a 40-year investigation that would uncover evidence the U.S. government kept classified until 1982. Here's what most people don't know. The Navy did search Gardner Island. 1 week after Earhart disappeared, they sent the USS Colorado, a battleship with 3 float planes, all the way from Hawaii. On July 9, 1937, those planes flew over Gardner Island for 20 minutes. They didn't see an airplane, but they saw something they didn't understand. Clear signs of recent habitation. The Navy assumed all these islands had native workers harvesting coconuts, so finding signs of people wasn't unusual. Except, here's the problem. Nobody had been on Gardner Island since 1892. Someone had been there recently. Someone who shouldn't have been there. The Navy didn't realize this. They crossed Gardner Island off the list and never went back. But 3 months later, the British sent a colonization expedition to evaluate the island. And one officer, Eric Bevington, took photographs of the shoreline. For 73 years, that photograph sat in a photo album. Eric Bevington had sent it home to his father in 1937, the only reason it survived. When the Japanese attacked the Gilbert Islands in 1941, they destroyed the British headquarters and all his negatives. But the photo album remained. Rick's team discovered Bevington was still alive in 1992, living in England. They visited him. His wife Patricia took copy photos. Years later, in 2010, forensic imaging expert Jeff Glickman was examining the photographs. "Hey, what's this thing?" he asked, pointing to something on the reef. Rick looked. "I don't know." Glickman studied it closer. "I need better resolution." They traveled to Oxford University, where Bevington's papers were archived, set up specialized equipment to get maximum resolution from the photograph. Here's the challenge. The photograph was wallet-sized. The object Glickman was examining was smaller than a grain of sand. But he did the forensic analysis, and he came back with a conclusion that stopped Rick cold. This is wreckage from the landing gear of a Lockheed Model 10 Electra. The exact type of plane Amelia Earhart flew. Rick needed confirmation. "That's too many eggs in one basket. I need a second opinion." He had connections at the U.S. State Department. He gave them the photograph. 2 months later, he got a call. "Come to Washington. We need to talk." Rick went to the secure area, met with 3 men who don't have last names. They confirmed it. "We see what your guy sees. It looks like Lockheed Electra landing gear. Our only concern is whether the negative was altered. But the negative was destroyed by the Japanese in 1941, and these were prints sent home in 1937. Nobody altered a negative in 1937 to fake Amelia Earhart's crash. The landing gear was there, 3 months after she disappeared. For nearly a week after Earhart vanished, people heard radio distress calls. Not just government operators in the Pacific, ordinary people, housewives in their homes across America listening on shortwave radios. The official story dismissed these as hoaxes or misunderstandings. But here's what the official story didn't explain. Earhart's radio frequency, 3,105 kilohertz, was reserved by international agreement exclusively for U.S. registered aircraft. She was the only U.S. registered aircraft in that part of the world. So when people heard transmissions on that frequency, even if they couldn't make out words, it meant someone was transmitting, and only Earhart was authorized to use it. Government operators heard a woman's voice, unintelligible, but recognizable. The Coast Guard cutter Itasca wrote in their radio log, "We hear her now." Then they heard a man's voice. "Oh, I guess it's not her." Here's the stunning part. The Itasca didn't know Fred Noonan was on the airplane. How is that possible? The Itasca was in the middle of the Pacific. They didn't get newspapers. All they received were official radio transmissions coordinating schedules, and every message mentioned only Amelia. No mention of a navigator. So when they heard a man's voice, they assumed it couldn't be her. But the transmissions continued, night after night. And Lockheed, the airplane manufacturer, noticed something critical. "Wait," they said, "if she's sending calls night after night, the airplane is not in the water. Radios don't work when wet. That airplane is on land." More than that, she's able to recharge the battery. The only way to do that is run the right-hand engine, and she can't do that unless the plane is sitting on its wheels. The airplane had not crashed. It had made a safe landing somewhere on land. Betty Klenk was 15 years old, St. Petersburg, Florida, July 2, 1937. She was at home and cruising the shortwave dial on her radio that afternoon. Suddenly, she heard Amelia Earhart calling for help. Betty grabbed her notebook, the one she used to write down lyrics of her favorite songs, and started transcribing what she could make out. For an hour and 45 minutes, she wrote. Her father came home from work. "Dad, I'm hearing Amelia Earhart and she's in bad trouble." He checked with a neighbor who also had shortwave equipment. The neighbor couldn't pick up the signal. His antenna wasn't good enough. Betty's father took her notebook to the Coast Guard office in St. Petersburg. "Yeah, we know. A lot of people are hearing this. We're on top of it." They dismissed it. Betty tried for years to get someone to pay attention. Nobody would listen. She eventually gave up. "I know what happened, but nobody wants to pay attention to me." Decades later, in 1985, a neighbor who was a member of Rick's research organization called him. "I have a neighbor with a notebook from 1937. She says she heard Amelia Earhart's distress calls." Rick talked to Betty, examined the notebook. It was genuine, a real 1937 school notebook. The transcription read like a modern 911 call. "Help me. Knee deep. Water, knee deep. Where are you? We can't bail out." 2 voices, Amelia and Fred Noonan, in a hot cockpit with an open hatch. Noonan trying to get out. Amelia trying to send a message while dealing with him. And then Betty wrote something that didn't make sense. NY, New York. Rick asked Betty what it meant. "That's how I write New York City." She kept saying something that sounded like New York City. The shipwreck on Gardner Island's reef was the SS Norwich City. Amelia was trying to tell people what island she was on by referencing the shipwreck. She didn't know the island's name. They'd flown off their map. But she could see a big shipwreck and thought someone might know it. Norwich City, New York, NY. Betty couldn't have known that. It's what researchers call occult information. Details the witness couldn't possibly have fabricated. So Amelia landed safely, sent radio calls. Navy planes flew overhead a week later. Why didn't they see her? Because by the time the planes arrived, rising tides had washed the airplane off the reef into the ocean. When Amelia landed, the tide was out. The reef was dry. It looked like a runway. When the Navy arrived on July 9th, it was high tide. All they saw was surf breaking across the reef. They weren't looking at the reef anyway. They were looking inland for an airplane on the ground. But there's another reason. People on the ground at Gardner Island are incredibly hard to see from the air. Rick's team proved this in 2001 when they flew over the island in a helicopter. People on the ground waving at the helicopter were completely invisible in the video footage unless you freeze-framed and knew exactly where to look. If Amelia was even slightly back from the beach, hidden by vegetation, the search planes would have flown right over her. 20 minutes of circling. Then they left, and Amelia knew. They've looked here. They're not coming back. In 1940, a British colonial officer named Gerald Gallagher found a partial skeleton on the southeast end of Gardner Island. On near the bones, a dead bird, a dead turtle, parts of a woman's shoe. Gallagher sent a message to his superiors. "I think this might be Amelia Earhart." The response from the British High Commissioner: "Send everything to us. Keep your mouth shut. Strictly secret." The bones were sent to Dr. Hoodless in Fiji for evaluation. Hoodless had no training in forensic anthropology. The science didn't exist yet. He took measurements, applied formulas, and concluded, short, stocky European male. The British didn't know Amelia had a navigator with her. If the bones were male, they couldn't be Amelia Earhart. The bones were deemed of no consequence and likely thrown out, but Dr. Hoodless's measurements survived in the records. In 2018, Dr. Richard Jantz, world-renowned forensic anthropologist at the University of Tennessee, analyzed those measurements using modern techniques. He compared them to Amelia's bone structure, calculated from photographs using forensic imaging. The height matched, the bone lengths matched. And something unusual. Amelia had an uncommon ratio of upper arm to forearm bone length. Not freaky, but fairly rare. The castaway bones had the exact same ratio. Dr. Jantz published his findings in the Journal of Forensic Anthropology. The conclusion: 99.28% probability those bones were Amelia Earhart. Rick's expeditions to Gardner Island found evidence of a castaway, a jar of freckle cream, Dr. Barry's freckle ointment, broken into pieces. One shard showed signs of being used as a cutting tool to scrape meat from turtle bones. So Amelia was known to be self-conscious about her freckles. It makes sense she'd have freckle cream on a world flight where she'd be photographed constantly. A bone-handled jackknife. Beaten apart to extract the blades. Exactly what a castaway would do to make fishing spears. And here's the detail that made Rick catch his breath. The U.S. Army inventory of Amelia's plane, after her Hawaii accident, listed a bone-handled double-bladed jackknife. A zipper pull, Talon brand. The auto-lock design, patented in 1933, but with no USA stamp, which Talon started adding in 1936 when they began exports. That dates it precisely to 1933 to 1936, the exact window when Amelia was flying. A piece of aluminum aircraft skin, not accordioned from impact, bowed out from one side, cut with a sharp tool on one edge. Metal fatigue failure on another. But exactly what you'd expect from someone trying to salvage usable material from wreckage. Amelia survived the landing. The evidence suggests she lived for weeks, possibly 2 months. She moved from the landing site to the southeast end of the island, the best spot for survival. Close to the lagoon for clams, close to the reef for fish trapped in tidal pools. Yes, trees to climb to watch for rescue ships. She caught small fish, birds, baby turtles, easier to catch than adults. But here's the problem. No carbohydrates. You can survive on protein alone, but eventually it will kill you. It's called protein poisoning, rabbit starvation, or she simply ran out of water, or succumbed to infection. Her body was found under a wren tree. No signs of violent death. She likely died peacefully, or at least quietly, hoping rescue would come. In 1937, our Secretary of the Treasury Henry Morgenthau was in a meeting when the phone rang. It was Eleanor Roosevelt's secretary. A stenographer was transcribing the meeting, so we have Morgenthau's side of the conversation. "We can't release this report. Amelia Earhart's reputation would be finished. You know how closely she's associated with the Roosevelt administration. The president's already taken heat for the $40 million search. We've got elections coming up." That report stayed classified until 1982. It gave Amelia's husband time to edit and publish her book, Last Flight, portraying her as the pioneering aviator who mysteriously disappeared through bad luck. The truth was buried for 45 years. The landing gear photograph, the radio bearings that cross at Gardner Island, Betty's notebook, the bones with 99.28% certainty. The artifacts of survival. The evidence isn't a theory. It's documented, forensically analyzed, peer-reviewed. Amelia Earhart didn't vanish over the Pacific. She landed safely on Gardner Island. Survived for weeks, possibly months. Sent desperate radio calls heard by dozens of people. Search planes flew overhead but couldn't see her through the vegetation. And when she finally died, alone on a desert island, the U.S. government classified the evidence to protect a political narrative. 89 years later, we finally know the truth. She didn't disappear into mystery. She died waiting for a rescue that never came.